Europe was exhausted, kings ruled by bloodline, the poor starved, the rich grew richer. And in France, anger was beginning to boil beneath the surface. Then came revolution. A king would lose his throne, a queen would lose her head. And from the chaos of a collapsing nation, one man would rise to dominate Europe itself. A soldier, a strategist, a genius to some, a tyrant to others. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte. Welcome to Historical Truth. If you enjoy cinematic history documentaries that connect the past to the modern world, subscribe now. Before Napoleon, France was already breaking apart. By the late 1700s, the country was drowning in debt. Years of war and royal spending had emptied the treasury, while ordinary people struggled to survive. Bread prices soared, taxes crushed the poor, and the monarchy continued living in luxury. At the center of it all stood King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. To many French citizens, they became symbols of inequality. Meanwhile, new ideas were spreading across Europe. Thinkers like Voltaire and Jean-Jacques Rousseau questioned monarchy, privilege, and absolute power. People began asking dangerous questions. Why should kings rule by birth? Why should millions suffer while a few live in excess? Then, in 1789, France exploded too. French Revolution. Crowds stormed the Bastille prison in Paris. The French Revolution had begun. At first, revolutionaries demanded reform, but the movement quickly became more radical. The monarchy weakened, violence spread, and eventually King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. Soon after, Marie Antoinette met the same fate. France descended into chaos. Political factions turned on each other. Executions became routine. Fear ruled the streets. This period became known as the Reign of Terror. And while France tore itself apart internally, foreign powers prepared to attack. Europe's monarchies feared the revolution might spread. War was coming. And in the middle of that chaos, a young artillery officer began attracting attention. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. The outsider, Napoleon was not born into great French nobility. He came from Corsica, an island France had only recently acquired. He spoke French with a heavy accent and was often mocked by wealthier classmates during military school. But Napoleon possessed something rare: ambition without limits. He studied obsessively, especially warfare, history, and strategy. And during the revolution, opportunity appeared. The old aristocratic system was collapsing. Suddenly, talent mattered more than noble birth. For someone like Napoleon, the revolution became a ladder. The rise of Napoleon. Napoleon first gained fame during the siege of Toulon in 1793. His military brilliance helped French forces recapture the city from royalists and British troops. He was only 24 years old. Promotions came quickly. Then came Italy. In 1796, Napoleon was given command of the French army in Italy. The troops were starving, poorly equipped, and demoralized. Napoleon transformed them. He moved fast, attacked unexpectedly, separated larger enemy armies and defeated them one by one. His victories shocked Europe. Suddenly, France did not merely have a capable general, it had a legend. Napoleon understood something many commanders did not. Speed could be deadlier than size, and soldiers adored him because he marched beside them, inspired them, and promised glory. 5. Egypt and ambition. But Napoleon's ambition stretched beyond Europe. In 1798, he launched an invasion of Egypt. Officially, the campaign aimed to weaken British trade routes to India, but Napoleon also dreamed of building an Eastern empire. The campaign produced mixed results militarily, but culturally it became hugely significant. French scholars accompanying the army studied ancient Egypt extensively. During the campaign, the Rosetta Stone was discovered, later helping historians decode Egyptian hieroglyphics. But while Napoleon was abroad, France remained unstable. The government was weak. Corruption spread. The revolution had lost direction. Napoleon saw his chance. Taking power, in 1799, Napoleon returned to France. Soon after, he participated in a coup d'etat. The government collapsed. Napoleon emerged as first consul, effectively becoming the ruler of France. Many French citizens accepted it willingly. After years of revolution, terror, and instability, people wanted order, and Napoleon delivered it. He reformed the economy, improved education, strengthened infrastructure. Centralized power. Then came one of his most lasting achievements, the Napoleonic Code. This legal system emphasized equality before the law, religious freedom, and property rights. Its influence would spread far beyond France and shape legal systems across the modern world. But Napoleon's power continued growing. And eventually, one title was no longer enough. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself emperor. Notably, he took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. The symbolism was unmistakable. His authority came not from the church but from himself. Europe watched nervously. Because France was no longer simply revolutionary, it was becoming imperial. And Napoleon was preparing to reshape the continent through war. Conquering Europe, over the next decade, Napoleon dominated Europe, Austria, Prussia, Russia. Coalitions formed repeatedly to stop him. Again and again, he defeated them. His greatest victory came at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. Despite being outnumbered, Napoleon crushed the combined Russian and Austrian armies through deception and brilliant positioning. Military academies still study the battle today. At the height of his power, Napoleon controlled or influenced much of continental Europe. Kings fell, borders changed, empires trembled. To supporters, Napoleon spread modern reforms and revolutionary ideals. To enemies, he was a conqueror consumed by ambition. Both were true. The fatal mistake then came Russia. In 1812, Napoleon launched one of history's most disastrous invasions. Over 600,000 troops marched into the Russian Empire. But the Russians avoided decisive battle and retreated deeper into their territory, burning supplies behind them. Napoleon captured Moscow. But the city was nearly empty and soon engulfed in flames. Winter arrived. Food vanished. Temperatures collapsed. Disease spread. The retreat became a nightmare. Men froze to death, starved, collapsed beside the road. Of the massive army that entered Russia, only a fraction returned. Napoleon's aura of invincibility shattered. Europe sensed weakness, and his enemies united once more. Fall of an emperor. In 1814, Napoleon was forced to abdicate. He was exiled to the island of Elba. For many rulers, that would have been the end. Not Napoleon. Less than a year later, he escaped exile and returned to France. And astonishingly, soldiers sent to arrest him instead joined him. His return became known as the 100 Days. Europe panicked. One final battle would decide everything. Waterloo. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon faced British and Prussian forces near the Belgian village of Waterloo. The battle was brutal and chaotic. At first, victory still seemed possible, but delays, exhaustion, weather, and the arrival of Prussian reinforcements turned the tide. Napoleon was defeated. This time there would be no return. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, far from Europe, far from power. There he spent his final years reflecting on the empire he had built and lost. Napoleon died in 1821. He was 51 years old. The ending, but Napoleon's story did not end with his death, because his influence survived him. His wars reshaped Europe. His legal reforms influenced nations worldwide. His rise proved how revolution could create both liberty and dictatorship. And perhaps most importantly, Napoleon showed how quickly one extraordinary individual could alter the course of history when society itself was already in chaos. To some, he was a hero. To others, a tyrant. But nearly everyone agrees on one thing: Europe would never be the same again. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Historical Truth for more cinematic stories about the empires, leaders, and events that shaped our world. Because history is never just the past. Sometimes, it is the blueprint for the future.